Have you ever heard a story where a pastor just suddenly decided to shut down the doors of the church with almost no warning whatsoever, and then go in and basically tell the congregation, hey, if you want to gather here, you're going to have to pay me rent money, leave, take another job, and go away? Well, a small town in Tennessee saw exactly what happened there. So, in this episode, we're going to go over the events of what happened in this small town Tennessee church. And then we're going to get into the Bible and we're going to get into safeguards on how this can be prevented. Because sadly, a lot of people have this misconception that anything that has to do with church, is normally going to be good. People are going to be upstanding people. They're going to have biblical values. They're going to be led by the Spirit. But sadly, that is not always the case. So we place safeguards and church polity or church governance is another way to say that in those areas to kind of keep us within left and right limits to ensure things like this story that we're going to go over does not happen. I highly encourage you if you I want this to go viral in a way because this is so sad because if it's happening in this small town, I can't imagine how many other times it's happened before and it's just never reached the news. We need to make things like this go viral so that way we can learn, other people can learn and prevent this from happening again. All right, let's go ahead and jump into it. So, as the article reads here, this comes from a local news station, Action News 5. It says here, the shepherd is leaving. Where do the sheep go? Congregation left to pick up the pieces after pastor shuts down church. Just to give you a rundown of this, a small church in Halls, Tennessee, called Connect Church, which now they actually have a new name, but they abruptly closed the doors because their pastor, Ron Smith, announced from the pulpit that the church was shutting down due to what he claims was low membership and finances. This actually was not even the case when you dig in. And I've linked this article, by the way, with the video. Highly encourage you to read the article and watch the video. The video tells so much more. But the church definitely did not have to shut down due to money. That's kind of a cop out move because the church had, while it was a smaller amount, it was definitely a smaller congregation. The building was 100% paid off, and they had other assets as well, and they had money in their bank account. So if they really needed to leverage something because of bad finances, they could have done it. But once again, this just seems like an excuse. Members were blindsided by this, including in this sad story right here, a bride to be who had planned their wedding there because this is the church that she was attending with her family. And everything was set to go. And then right before the wedding, boom, church doors closed. After the closure, the pastor, and I say that term very loosely, posted no trespassing signs. He locked the doors and he declared that if the congregation wanted to meet there again, they would need to start a new church, get a new name, and pay rent to a new corporation that he started called the Connect Church Corporation. And obviously, him and his wife were the controllers of that. This is crazy because this isn't even the founding pastor of this church. He was hired on back around the 2020 timeframe. And this church has had their rough times and going through multiple different pastors and multiple different name changes. But this guy seemingly was just like, you know what? We're going to transfer everything into our name. And by our name, I mean him and his wife. We're going to transfer everything into our name. And then we're going to tell the church if they want to have church here, they're going to have to pay us rent money while I leave and take another church over. Yeah, because another church hired him. And a warning to that church here, if this is your new pastor, just be warned because this very same thing could happen to you next. He and his wife ended up making themselves the sole signees. Yeah, the sole signees on the church's bank account shortly before the closure. Right before the closure. They also removed the church secretary, who was the other signee on that church bank account. Basically, they controlled the bank account and nobody can do anything about it. The congregation claims that the building, and was verified through other sources, was boned outright and valued at around $400,000. So that church still had money in the bank and they had their property, money and assets, things of that nature. And you might be asking yourself, like, this has to be illegal. This absolutely has to be illegal. The police ended up saying that nothing was illegal here And sadly, from the digging that I did, and I even tagged Barry Bowens on this to see if we can get his response, and I'm still waiting on his reply. But everything here was basically legal. And the big reason why was because the church governance, the church bylaws, which doesn't even seem like they existed, were basically non-existent, and the church did not have a sound structure to prevent these things from happening. Now the members are fighting to regain control of this church property and the property accounts. This it's honestly such a sad story when you go in there and look at it. That's a picture of the young bride to be before they got the bad news that, hey, you can't have your wedding here. Luckily, if you wanted to know, a different organization ended up stepping in and giving her a place to go ahead and have her wedding. That is a picture right there of the pastor Ron Smith, who shut down the church, demanded rent money if they want to meet there, and then took a job at another church, which, by the way, is we ended up bringing it up on. Well, we had it up on Facebook. Now it seems to have gone away. Well, here it is, right here. So this is the church right here, High Haiti PH Church, about 45 minutes down the road, and basically they're welcoming in. You could see these same people as there, and this is how you know this church is probably not biblically sound too, because they're not only claiming he's the pastor, but also claiming his wife is the pastor as well, which we all know is unbiblical and wrong and not the way to go about things. But yeah, for this church, Haiti PH Church, yeah, you probably, I think that's a Pentecostal holiness church, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, you probably want to relook this, because what he did over at that church, him and his wife, might just happen to your church as well. Um, Honestly, just so sad. There's a woman who went to the church. It's like I said, go read the whole story for yourself. Watch the video. The video actually does a lot better job of explaining. They did end up saying in an update, the church, or not the church, but the news organization here, I got to give them credit. They were knocking on this pastor's door. They were trying to call, never got a response. They eventually did get a response sometime later. And basically, after the police investigation, after thing, there was some mediations that went on, and the pastor does now, after the mediations, have to give control of the church back to the members of the church. Albeit the name change still has to happen, and they do have a new name, and it has to happen by a certain time frame. And as of now, that time frame still has a little bit of time left in it. I believe it was like 45 days, but because this happened back in November, end of November time frame, but this sadly, it has not happened yet. So we'll see when this actually happens and what it actually looks like, and we'll report back to you on it as we go on. So I want to go over to your comments here a little bit as we go through. And then like I said, I really want to break down this biblically and talk about how to prevent this, because this is the larger story from this. Just because this pastor did this legally does not mean it was shepherd like, it was ethical, or it was biblical. In fact, it was the exact opposite. This isn't just one church's story. It's a cautionary lesson for every single church out there, especially the smaller churches. Churches need to understand governance, bylaws, and accountability when it comes to these things to prevent these things from happening in the future. Let's go ahead and jump over, before we do that, though, over to some of the comments to see what y'all are saying here in the live stream. We see a bunch of y'all are jumping in. Hey, Sherry, that is very, very kind of you. I don't ever ask for this stuff. It does help. If for those of you who are newer, by the way, any money that goes here goes towards my and this isn't me pitching. I don't ever want to make people feel begrudgingly like they have to give or anything like that. But any type of, I just usually set the commercials in for the beginning, and then that's about it. Any money that gets made on here gets made and goes directly towards my father's dementia care. Because if any of y'all had a parent that you had to place inside a dementia home, it is ridiculously expensive. So I do appreciate that. Sherry said that she has been following this, and it is crazy. That it is. It is very, very sad. Sala jumped in. She said, I'm so over the circus of these unscriptural churches, the mockery they're causing to our God is astounding. It's cringe. The world is scoffing at the church. Exactly. Because when you see things like this, let's just say you're either a brand new Christian or you are somebody who is, maybe antagonistic or against church, and you see things like this, all it's going to do is reinforce why they don't want to go to church. And it's sad. It's there's a broken system in there. And we do realize that there is no such thing as the perfect church on this side of heaven. We're a bunch of imperfect people who believe in Jesus Christ, made new inside of Jesus Christ, but we still have this flesh on us. We are not going to be perfect, but there are definitely biblical guidelines to ensure things like this does not happen. Okay, Turt put, much of this boggles my mind. Deeper, though, to call yourself a Christian, then to behave so unethical is insane. And I absolutely, absolutely agree with you on that. Let's go ahead now and jump over to the Bible. And please, as we go through, let's continue sharing what your thoughts and comments are. If you're watching this in the future, I highly encourage you to drop your thoughts and comments down as well, as I love getting those. So let's go ahead and jump on over to the Bible, because first off, I do want to say scriptural blueprint here. Shared leadership is necessary in a church. If you've watched this channel for any length of time, you know I am all about a plurality or multiple elders. The Bible is 100% clear on this. We do not see an example in the Bible of a church being, or a local assembly, let's put it that way, the local assembly being ran by one person in a CEO corporation style where they control everything. Acts chapter 14, verse 23. Here's an example. When they had appointed elders, plural, and that's plural in the Greek as well, elders, plural, from them for them in every church, having prayed with fasting, they commended them to the Lord in whom they had believed. So we already see in Acts chapter 14, local churches being established, and they set up a plurality of elders, multiple people to be in charge of the church, not just one person. Another example we see there is in Titus chapter 1, verse 5. For this reason, I left you in Crete so that you would set in order what remains and appoint elders. I even had this highlighted from before, plural, in every city as I directed you. First Peter chapter 5, verses 1 through 3. Again, therefore I exhort the elders, plural, right there, among you, as your fellow elder and fellow witness with the sufferings of Christ, and a partaker also of the glory that is to be revealed. Shepherd, and here's a great example right here of what should be doing as pastors: shepherd the flock of God among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but voluntarily, according to the will of God. Not for what? Not for sordid gain, acquiring all the church's property and bank accounts, but with eagerness, nor yet as lording it over those allotted to your charge, but providing to be examples to the flock. When you shut the church's doors down to a building that you really don't even own, and tell them that they have to pay you rent money in order to gather there, even though that building has long been paid off, is that not lording over those allotted to your charge? You're not providing a great example there. It so sad to see so many unbiblical pastors, using that term loosely, in these positions, because it brings reproach upon the name of Christ. Churches should avoid any type of structure, period, where there is only one pastor, one elder that is in control. Early churches appointed a plurality of elders, not a single authority figure. Leadership is supposed to be shared because this prevents power grabs. Not only that, but we also need to remember that as Christians, the congregation, the congregation, also have input on what is being said. You can go back to the book of Acts, once again, a great place to go, when they set up deacons. Because what did they do? They asked the people to choose the deacons from among them. Or what about in Acts chapter 15 at the Council of Jerusalem? When they came to their final conclusion, they came out and shared it with the congregation, and the congregation gave their affirmation. Congregations get a say. I'm not a big fan in 100% congregational led churches, because I think that's not I'm pretty positive that's what the Bible never says to have a 100% congregational led church, but congregational affirmation is needed inside of churches. Another thing that we need to go over is ethics with money inside a church. And this is honestly huge. And I brought up Second Corinthians chapter 8 verses 16 through 22 because sadly so many times this boils down to money. Sherry jumped in here and said, "Didn't he go over and start a different church?" And you think this could be a cover up for bigger things. I don't think he started a different church. From what we saw, he basically just jumped into another church, but he did start his own corporation. And here's a funny, I'm glad you brought that up, Sherry, because here's the other thing. In Tennessee law, and look this up, in Tennessee law, basically with what he did, even though it was legal, it was very shady, very wrong, and honestly, I think finding loopholes. What he did was legal, but under Tennessee law, he has to, if he ever liquidates that property, sells it off, whatever, that money can't go directly to him. What it can do, though, is go to a charity or an LLC or something like that. And of course, it looks like he started up his own LLC. So could that be one of the places that it goes to? I don't know. Time is yet to tell on that, but very shady and very sad. Let's go ahead and keep jumping in on this. Or could his new church be the beneficiary of that liquidation if that was going to happen? As of now, that's not supposed to happen anymore. Control is supposed to go back to the membership, but that's yet to actually happen, and we're waiting to see if that does happen. Goes on here once again, ethics with money, because financial integrity is not an option when you are running a church, or when you are not just running a church, a part of a church. I just want to read to you Second Corinthians chapter 8, verse 16 through 22, because this shows that even the Apostle Paul built in financial transparency into his ministry because it was important. Just read this with me and we'll break it down together. It says, "But thanks be to God who puts the same earnestness on your behalf in the heart of Titus." Mind you, Paul here just got done talking. This is all about money here. This gift that he's talking about here, it's going to be talking about money, monetary things to help other people. He says, "For he not accepted our appeal, but being himself very earnest, he has gone to you of his own accord. We have sent him along." Here, Paul's building the transparency. "We have sent him along with the brother whose fame in these things of the gospel is spread through all the churches." We don't know who this brother is, so to speak. I know there's some guesses out there, but Paul didn't just send Titus alone. He didn't send somebody alone. He sent somebody there who other churches knew of and trusted because of the things that he had spread throughout the gospel. So multiple churches knew this person. Here is some added in transparency, but it doesn't stop there. Paul built even more in, and he says, "And not only this, but he has also been appointed by the churches to travel with us in this gracious work, which is being administered by us for the glory of the Lord himself, and to show our readiness, taking precaution so that no one will discredit us in our administration of this generous gift." See, Paul was taking precaution by having multiple people that multiple people trusted, the multiple churches trusted and known, ensuring it wasn't just going to be somebody could point the finger at Paul and said, "Look, Paul's hoarding all this money. Paul and his minions are hoarding all this money." No, there were multiple people along for this ride, and they were people that the churches trusted, taking precautions so that no one will discredit us in our administration or the giving of this generous gift. "For we have regarded for what is honorable, not only in the sight of the Lord, which is what truly matters, but also in the sight of men." Paul understood it was important that financial transparency and trust was built when it came to this gift, assumably financial gift. "We have sent them with our brother, whom we have often tested." Look at that right there. "We have sent him with our brother, whom we have often tested and found diligent in many things, but now even more diligent because of his great confidence in you." Too many times today, and I think it might just be part of the Christian nature to be a little bit more trusting. Oh, this person's a Christian. They say they're a Christian. They're a part of a church. I should be able to trust them. And I wish that was the case. But sadly, so many times it is not. So what do we do as a church? Do just what Paul did in the early church. Test them. Find them to be diligent. If a church is looking for a new pastor, if a church is looking for a deacon, if a church is looking for an elder, they need to be diligent and not just hire the first person that they see, but rather test them. Find them to be diligent in many things. And this could be a long process and it could be heartaching for some churches who are looking for that leadership. And I understand, I get it, but you need to test them to find out that they are diligent in these things. Otherwise, you can end up with a case just like we see in this church that we are reading about. And it's so sad to see. Paul built in financial transparency in the early church. Churches today should be doing that as well. There are some safeguards that we can place on that in our modern day church appliance, such as having dual signatures where the other signature isn't the pastor's spouse, having safeguards set up to where somebody like the pastor can't remove the church secretary from the bank account without anybody knowing. You also set up finance committees. I know, like example, every church that I've been a part of, and especially my current church, we have finance committees. And every business meeting, they open up the books. They give you a spreadsheet. They show you what's what. You can look at the bank accounts and you can see exactly what is going on with the money. And if you don't like it, you can have a say in it. You can record, hey, I reject this motion. I don't like this. I don't think this is good. This is not what we should be doing. Your voice matters. Public reporting is also another safeguard, just like we talked about with those business meetings. Those books should be open for every single member inside that church to know where that money is going and who has control over that money. Salah jumped in and said, I'm at the stage where when someone says they're a Christian, I actually don't even trust them at all. In our day and age, Christian is used so lightly. I feel awful saying that, although it's true. And Salah, I understand completely what you're saying because I'm right there with you. I am very, very hard in like, I don't ever want to judge someone for salvation because that's not what I am supposed to do. The Bible, we're not the judges of that. That's Christ. That's God. I like to take people at their word if they say it. But so many people today have such a misunderstanding of Jesus. And then there's others who are just straight up wolves that you have no idea. So what do? Just like we said here in this passage, the answer is always back in the Bible. Test them. Find them to be diligent. And then you can have confidence and trust built when it comes to things of this nature. I see Observation Station jumped in there. Hey, Merry Christmas to you, Observation Station. Love to see you on here. I hope you're doing well. All right, let's keep going on. So accountability applies. We need to remember not just to the people inside the church, but accountability also applies to the leaders. There's a number of passages that you can go here, such as when Paul, basically called out Peter in front of everybody, and publicly rebuked him. But and you can go to Matthew chapter 18. That's another one that a lot of people go to. But remember, biblical correction includes pastors. They are a part of that. Elders, deacons, they're all a part of that. There must be a process set up inside your church for confronting wrong actions in leadership. If your church is lacking that, then demand that that be addressed. Leaders are not above correction. One of the things that my pastor does, and he's brave for doing this, and I love that he does this. And if I was a pastor, I would be doing the same thing. No, as hard as it can be. He opens himself up to public correction. He will sit down with the members and say, all right, what are we doing that could be done better? Go ahead. Thick skin time. It also helps that my pastor was in the Army for over 20 years, just like I've been. So you develop thick skin while you're in the military. I'll tell you that. But he'll openly ask people for criticism to see what's going on because it's important for him to know that. And I think that's important for a correction. Nobody's going to be above a correction when it comes to these things. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 19 through 20, there is a biblical model for calling out those in leadership. Why? Because Paul knew through inspiration of the Holy Spirit that this would be a problem at some point in time. It says here, do not receive an accusation against an elder except, or pastor, you can use those words interchangeably, except on the basis of 2 or 3 witnesses. We see a lot of 2 or 3 witnesses in the Bible. Take note of that. Those who continue in sin rebuke in the presence of all so that the rest will be fearful of sinning. It's important, just like any person, you don't take an accusation against them just based off of what one person's saying. You need to have 2 or 3 witnesses. You need to have those solid evidence. You need to have those facts. And then once those 2 or 3 witnesses are there, that's when you can do your investigating into that evidence, into that fact. But if it's just one person, who knows if it's someone who just doesn't like their teaching, they don't like their theology, they have a grudge against them. It's important that if there's more people saying it, there's more witnesses there, then there's might be some more credibility to it. And that's your sign as a church to go ahead and dig in and receive that. And then obviously, those who continue to sin, those pastors who continue to sin, even after being called out and proven to be wrong, rebuke them in the presence of all so that the rest will be fearful of sinning. That is absolutely needed and absolutely necessary. Sherry jumped in again and said, she said, leaders are not above correction. Tim, will you write every single church in the world? Know that I'll help you. I don't think I would. Oh man, my arm just be really tired. If you ever see my actual, there's a reason why, like when I do sermons, I type out all my notes because I can't even read my own handwriting. It's a lost art in these days. And it's probably going to get even worse now as kids, like I'm 40. So as kids that have only had computers, like, we had computers, but they weren't, great in the early 90s and late 80s and all that stuff. But kids now who know smart computers, it's probably going to be a lot tougher for them when it comes to handwriting. I got to actually check it out to see if it's any good. We'll see as Trevor gets older and starts writing. But anyways, uh, continuing on, a practical takeaway from this, from First Timothy chapter 5, verse 19 through 20 could be this: include discipline procedures in your church's bylaws. If you're a member of a church or you're part of a church, ask to see the bylaws and ask specifically, is there discipline procedures in there, not just for the members, but also for the staff, the pastors, the deacons, the elders? Ask for them. And if they're not there, demand that they get put in there. Once again, you have a say. Very, very, very important. Let's move on to another topic from here: the role of the congregation. And we hit up on this a little bit earlier. Members are not just consumers inside a church. They're not just there to go ahead and sit there and be mindless and take in things, and they have no say in whatsoever. They are participants. They are the church. The members are the church in all of its essence. We talked about Acts chapter 15. We also mentioned Acts chapter 6, which we have right here. We see here in the creation of deacons, they went to the congregation to actively choose the people who were going to be deacons inside that church. There are multiple other things that we can go to in the Bible, but the Bible is very descriptive in how the congregation plays a role inside a church. You as a congregation have a say. Once again, while I believe the elder-led church is the biblical model, elders ruling the church, the congregation also gets input and approval. So whatever the elders come up with also has to be approved by the rest of the congregation. This is how we prevent situations like we just read about in this article. So members in this story, by the way, just to give you, the members in this news story, and I want to make sure I put that separation there. The members in this news story, they never saw minutes, they never saw bylaws, and they never saw any meetings because they did not participate in any decisions. Now, the church did, by the way, this church did hold a meeting right before the pastor announced he was closing the doors. And this pastor was honestly just so smug. They have a video of it in this news article here. But the church did hold a meeting saying, like, no, we're going to continue as a church, even when this pastor steps down, because they probably got wind that he was going to step down. The senior pastor ends up saying, like, hey, that little meeting, he literally said, that little meeting y'all had, I didn't sanction it. I didn't say it was okay. I didn't participate. So that meeting is null and void. Like it's your church. It's not Christ's church. It's not the members who are the church. It's you. It, honestly, absolutely irritating. But I imagine from the reading that I was doing based on this church, and I could be wrong, but from the reading that I was doing and some of the investigating that I was doing, it seemed like this church just honestly did not have many meetings. They did not even have any type of bylaws set up. I could be wrong on that, but from what I saw, it didn't look like it. And if there were bylaws, they were probably not the best written bylaws because then things like this would not happen. So, what can I stress to you as members of a church? Document meetings, record votes, keep minutes on those meetings. Every single church meeting should start with reading the minutes off from the last meeting. So that way we know. And if hey, there's a correction. Hey, actually, remember we talked about this? Oh, yeah, let's go ahead and correct that. Educate yourselves on your rights and responsibilities as a member of a church. I think too often today, and this happened because of mega church mentality and it's trickled down into smaller churches where churches no longer really have memberships. Churches, or they have some type of pseudo membership, but you actually have no power whatsoever. And those churches, the people are just consumers and slave force drivers for their volunteer of building the brand of that church up more and more and more. Be active in your church. I tell you what, it pains me, hurts me when I go to a church membership meeting and half the members aren't even there. Even in my current church right now, and I saw some of them watch this, so I love people to death. But if you're a member of a church, go to the business meetings. You're not just a consumer. You don't just take things in and then you just leave. You are a part of what God is doing in that community, and that should give you joy. That should give you absolute joy. Be an active member of the church. Don't just show up on Sundays and consume and leave. Very, very important because it prevents, once again, things like this happening. Next, I do want to take us over to some more scripture, specifically Mark chapter 10, verses 42 through 45, and talk about leadership character versus power. Listen to what Jesus said here. He said, calling them to himself, Jesus said to them, "You know that those who are recognized as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. But it is not this way among you. But whoever wishes to become great among you shall be your servant. And whoever wishes to be first among you shall be a slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many." Pardon my cough right there. Uh, we see the example of leadership in Jesus Christ, one of the greatest examples of all time. This is the standard. We also see this in John chapter 10, verses 11 through 13. I want to jump over the comments real quick. Salah said, "Some Christians are literally starting home churches due to the ongoing deception in the actual church building by those who claim to be shepherds. It's sad, the ongoing intimidation and bullying." Yeah. And home church, I don't condemn home church as being wrong by any means whatsoever. If that's what people want to do, that's what people want to do, and that's fine. And you can honestly say that home church is probably a little bit closer to what you see in the biblical models. The only thing that I get upset about with home church is that most home churches that I've seen is typically a extended family meeting, of 15 to maybe 30 people at most. They're all extended family with each other, and very little accountability inside those churches. And you're just not, and rarely do they give to missions. Some of them do. I'm sure some of them do, but rarely do they give to missions. One of the beautiful things about having an actual like local place where we can gather multiple people, no matter the size, is the power to put finances together and give to missionaries so that they can spread the gospel to areas that need it. Because not all of us are called to be a missionary and go into Nigeria and Haiti and all these other places, China, where they despise the gospel, or some people despise the gospel, I'll say, that need to hear the gospel. We're not all the sent. So if you can't be the sent, be the sender, and having a larger local body can definitely assist in that by pooling together those finances and resources. But here in Mark chapter 10, or sorry, John chapter 10, it says here, I am Jesus once again, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who is not the owner of the sheep, sees the wolves coming and leaves and flees, and the wolf snatches and scatters them. What did this pastor do? Was he a shepherd that stood his ground, protecting from the wolves? Or was he being a wolf himself and scattering the sheep everywhere by shutting down the doors of a church that he, while legally may have owned because of some shady signatures, he truly did not own, and he did not pay for that building? That man's not a pastor. I don't care if it was legal. That man is not a pastor. There's a difference between legal and ethical in Christian behavior. True shepherds serve. Hirelings just want to control. In this situation, the pastor behaved more like a hireling by taking ownership rather than, and I say ownership in the financial means, not ownership as in like, hey, I'm taking ownership of this, by taking ownership rather than a shepherd serving the flock. Does your church structure reward leaders for serving or empower them to take over control? That's a question I want to ask you. And, a question you can ask yourself when you're reading through your church's bylaws, your church's constitution, things of that nature. It's always said in the Middle East, in the East, the Middle East, the church structure is different in their dynamics to the West. The East have a true fear of God, almost too fearing, if that makes sense. The West lacks that reverence. And while I've been to the Middle East many, many times in my life. It was always for work related things, more times than I can count, honestly. I've never had the chance to actually go to a church there, but I'll go ahead and take your word on, Saul, as you got that background from the area that you're from there. I'm not going to announce that on here just in case. I don't know if you want that known, but hey, the Bereans are here. I love that name. This is insane. I expect wolves running churches. I just expect wolves to find. I can't find a biblical. And this lends exactly to what we were saying earlier with this, because people see this, especially, and I'm not claiming this about you, the Bereans are here, because I don't know you, but especially newer Christians or those who are skeptics about church, they see these things and they just are going to associate now every church is bad. And take it from me, someone who has to travel, and I've been traveling every 2 to 3 years for 20 years of my military life, moving to a new town and having to find a new church. There are solid biblical churches out there. The sad thing is you have to do your homework on it. You have to look hard and you have to ask the tough questions, and you can't just assume. And I really, really wish it was not that way, but it is. It absolutely, sadly is. But I can empathize with your statement there. I can absolutely empathize with your statement. Okay, Salah said it's okay. Yep, she's Lebanese. She's from a Lebanese Christian family. I actually got to go over to Lebanon. I was on the Christian side of it. Once again, it was work related stuff, but definitely a beautiful city when you actually go in there and look at it. I was in Beirut for a small period of time, but definitely a beautiful city. But anyways, continuing on. Next thing I want to go over is wisdom and counsel. No major decisions should ever be made alone. We do not see that anywhere. Correct me if I'm wrong. Inside the Bible, at least that I can bring up to my mind. And the Bible, in fact, encourages to have wisdom and counsel with a multitude of people. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 14 says, where there is no guidance, the people fall. But in an abundance of counselors, there is victory. Talking about multiple people, input, all that stuff. Acts chapter 20, verse 28 through 30. Here's another one. Be on guard for yourselves and for all the flock which among which the Holy Spirit has made you, talking about pastors here, overseers, to shepherd the church of God, which he purchased with his own blood. I know that after my departure, savage wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. And from among your own selves, men will arise speaking perverse things to draw away the disciples after them. This is why we set up multiple people, multiple elders, and we have congregational input. No major decision to be made alone. For those of you in a local church, boards, advisors, an outside counsel can be a good thing. Although I don't particularly care for that structure, it can be a good thing if it's done the right way. In my opinion, once again, you just go back to the biblical model of having elders, plural, inside that church. But it's not bad to have an outside eye come in and look at things from every now and again. I know most of the best pastors that I have ever met with have a relationship with other pastors inside the community and will lean on their counsel in times where they just want a quick, accountability check or a double check on something. Relying solely on one leader is truly, truly dangerous. And I was just thinking, I didn't pull it up for this reason, but this passage is honestly so appropriate to this story that we're reading, because wolves are rising among themselves, seeking perverse things to draw away the disciples after them. How can you call yourself a pastor, shut down a church that you were not even there since its beginning? You didn't pay for that church, and then claim you own it, and then demand the members of that church pay you rent. Is absolutely disgusting. Disgusting. The Bereans are here. Said, yes, I'm praying for a way to fellowship in a good church. I know many from YouTube. I'm glad. That's encouraging to see that the Bereans are here. I love that name, by the way. That's such a great name. One of my favorite sayings I always talk about with my buddies is be a Berean. Acts chapter 17. Don't just take what people are telling you, be a Berean and dig in to see if these things are true. Let's keep on reading on. All the passages actually we had up for today. I did want to go over this really quick though, which was just a little checklist I made, and it's not even going to be presented nicely. It's on a blank Google document that I put here. But here is some healthy governance checks that you can kind of do. And this is not an exhaustive list, so that I'm sure there are much more things that you can kind of do as a church. But if you're a member of a church, you have a say in things, and ask these questions and ask if some of these are in place. And there's probably more. If you know of more, put it in the comments, please. Absolutely. It says here, healthy governance checklist is what I put down. So having a plurality of elders and a leadership team, multiple people, have clear bylaws that everyone understands. Great example, my church, FB, I almost named 2 churches ago, FBC Cash in Cache, Oklahoma. That's my local church. On our website, we post our church's bylaws up there. So anyone, not just members, but anyone can read them. Making sure they're clear and able to understand. Have those bylaws in place. Get them cross-checked. Get them double-checked. Have them checked off with other churches that may be solid. So that way hey, there might be some room here for this. There might be some room here for that. Oh, this is a red flag. Oh, this is a really good practice, et cetera, and so on. Have member meetings and record the minutes for those member meetings. Have financial transparency inside the church, and have dual control, meaning not just one person, or in this case, one family, husband-wife team, control the finances, and make it to where there's basically you can't just do what this pastor did and remove the church secretary from the bank books. It should not be that much control. There has to be multiple notifications going on there. Once again, financial transparency also key. A church that refuses to open up their books for its members is a huge, huge red flag. I could walk into my church today and ask them, open up the bank account books, please. They will do it, because they're all about transparency. A good church has financial transparency. If your church is not being financially transparent, they won't allow you to look at the books. That's a red flag. You must also have a defined discipline process, outside counsel when needed, and teaching the congregation how the church functions. A lot of times, I know my current church doesn't do this, but my pastor he's much more individual based. So our senior pastor will go from person to person to person who wants to be a new member of that church and talk with them. But some churches do membership classes. It might be a week long thing. It might be just a one Sunday. It might be, a couple Sundays. Who knows? Everybody's got different structure, but they'll teach how the church functions and how that goes inside those membership classes. And I know there was no membership class inside the Bible, Tim, and I get that. But churches have lost so much in the mud of everything ever since the early church. And because of all the different horrible things that we've seen inside churches, there has to be these types of structures put in place to know that we are in a safe environment. So it's good when churches actually teach the congregation, hey, like as a member, you're expected to come to these meetings and you have a say in what goes on. Observation Station said here, going back to the article, saying, please tell me this pastor is getting papers served and sued. So you might have missed the beginning. Anybody who jumped in towards the end on the live, just quick recap. Sadly, this pastor did everything legally because the church did not have the proper structure set up. An investigation was done by the police, and he did nothing illegal. Was it unethical? 100%. Was it unbiblical? 100%. Was it illegal? No, it was not illegal. But through mediation, the church will go back to the congregation. That's yet to be seen. There's still some time left on the 45-day window that they were supposed to do through mediation, but we'll see if that actually happens or not. All right. So there's a little bit of a longer episode and a little bit more of a teachier episode, but I appreciate y'all. Hopefully lessons are learned from this. If you have any other great practices that you think, please drop them in the comments. I want to hear it. I love hearing about it. I love being able to talk about these things. I hate talking about these things, but I love talking about these things and the fact that we can learn from them. And that is truly my desire, that we as Christians learn from this. All right. With all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump off here. Y'all hope you had a Merry Christmas yesterday. For those who are watching currently, for those in the future, you're like, man, Christmas was like a week ago, Tim. What are you talking about? But anyways, I'll talk to y'all later. I love y'all, and go to church, y'all. Read your Bible. I love y'all, and I'll talk to y'all on the next.